All right, and we're off. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this evening, spending an hour or so with us here this evening to talk about certainly one of the most vaunted birding hotspots in Chicagoland and the country here. This program is Patch Chat. This is a collaborative program between Chicago Ornithological Society and Chicago Audubon Society. It was born out of COVID to really give everybody the opportunity to learn about and feel more connected to really awesome and unique birding areas in the Chicagoland area, especially in a time when we didn't necessarily have access to expert leaders on hikes or big groups to go visit these sites ourselves. So the hope here is that by the end of today's program, you're going to feel as empowered to go visit this site and bird there like a pro, like anybody who's been birding there for 30 years. Or 5 or 1. Either way, you're going to at least know somewhat what you're doing next time you go and you visit. My name is Edward. I am president of Chicago Ornithological Society, and I'm just really excited to bring together some really awesome knowledge in the room here to really lay out, a collective many decades worth of birding experience and knowledge. Additionally, following this program, obviously it's spring migration, which means there are spring migration walks happening left and right. So both Chicago Audubon and Chicago Ornithological have a full suite of spring hikes and events coming out scheduled all the way through at least June. So definitely hop over to our website, chicagoaudubon.org and chicagobirder.org to take a look at some of those events and really see all the ways you can take advantage of a lot of the knowledge you even see here tonight to go birding with. So that said, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. You didn't come here to hear me blabber, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our first speaker. Alicia, take it away.
Thank you, Edward. My name is Alicia Klunenberg, and I am the volunteer co-steward for Montrose Point. I've been the co-steward since 2015, I think. I'm really looking forward to having a good season this year, getting back out there and doing some work. I put together a few slides just to talk about upcoming work that we're expecting for the year and just to talk a little bit about our work days if anybody wants to come and volunteer. Okay, so as I mentioned, I was going to start out with a little bit of the work we're expecting for the season. The Park District, it's probably already done, but they were going to be doing some seeding along the new trail. They'll be just doing some high mowing during the season. The high mowing is important to reduce annual weed competition. When our baby plants are coming up, the annual weeds like to hog the light. So the high mowing is a very typical restoration practice that will be occurring again this year. There's going to be some new mapping and some new signs and some new bike racks. Okay. I'll go back a slide here. So yeah, those were some of the tasks that the Park District will be working on this season. What we do on our volunteer work days, we usually work on some invasive plant weed removal. Most of this is hand removal. We do some cleanup from garbage pickup to cleaning the stairs, cleaning the sidewalks. Sometimes if there have been forts built with down trees, that sort of thing, we'll clean that sort of thing up as well. And then, sometimes we do other tasks like seeding or planting or mulching. It just depends on what's needed for that season. And then some things that may come up, budget pending, if the Park District gets the money, these would be great. A mown path across the prairie so that birders can look at the trees from the backside, maybe in the plans. We're hoping that we can define the trails in the back, the trampled shady areas. And this would involve some reclamation of heavily trampled areas using light tilling and putting a lot of plants in. And then I don't think it's very far in the process, but they're hoping to get started on the engineering solutions for where the path is sinking on the hook near where the dunes meets the prairie. Are some of the things that may come up this year if the budget works out. Next slide. So just to talk a little bit more about what we usually do on our work days. And, we've got a lot of invasive weeds we work on every year. Some of the typical plants we'll remove on our work days include motherwort, garlic mustard, bindweed. We've got a lot of bindweed that shows up in the middle of the summer. Some burdock. Occasionally we'll find some woody species that have eluded us for a while, like buckthorn, that we'll take care of right away when we find it. Some more invasive plant removal. This looks like it was, we had some probably motherwort and garlic mustard in there on one of our work days. We also occasionally help out with planting. We've got a few areas volunteers have planted in the past. This picture is actually that demonstration prairie, which was some volunteer work, and that was partially the Park District employees as well. And this was our new native planting area we put in after the path was installed, along with some seeding, which was really great. We had a really great work day that day, putting in some native prairie plants. Some just general cleanup. As I mentioned, I'm sure you've all seen it. There's a lot of garbage that can accumulate. So we clean that up, and we do things like we cleaned up these stairs, which were covered in sand last year. Just whatever's needed that day. Sometimes mulching. We've had some really, really great mulching days where we've added mulch to the trails and the shady areas. And then we have our dates are set for this year for 2022. All of our work days are from 9 a.m. until noon. The list is here. I believe they'll also end up on the Park District website. And all the tools are provided, which includes gloves and any trowels or cutters or anything like that that we need, weeders. All of that is provided on our work days, and we have a good time. So, hopefully we'll see some of you there this year. And finally, this is where we meet. The meeting location is at the entrance, the main entrance of Montrose Point Bird Sanctuary. So that's our typical meeting location. If you're interested to get on my email list for updated information on work days, my email is listed here. And then just a little information on where you can find more information about the restoration work at Montrose that's planned for the future, and some has already happened, that can be found on the Chicago Park District website. And that is all I have. Let's see.
Alicia, do we have to sign up to volunteer, or do you just show up?
You just show up. You don't have to, you don't have to sign up at all in advance.
Awesome. Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
And I mean, it probably goes without saying that it's massively important the work that you and your volunteers do, because it is a big reason why Montrose is the place that it is, and why it's so critical and important for birds. So thank you once again. And hopefully many, many birders will be coming out in droves now to help you make it the amazing bird, to continue keeping it the amazing birding spot that it is, and supporting the birds that we also love seeing there. All right, take it away, Fran.
So my name's Fran Morell. I am on the COS board. Full disclosure, I'm also the membership chair. We operate on a calendar year membership, so you've probably received some nasty reminder emails from me in the last few weeks to sign back up if you haven't already done so. And if you have, thank you. I've been birding for a little more than 15 years. Matthew and I started around the same time. Some funny stories there, and he lives less than a mile from my house. And Montrose became my predominant stop right out of the box, and I started using eBird right away. and right around 2006, 2007. I've now birded at Montrose over 1,000 times. I have 1,020 checklists. And hopefully at some point in the next couple of years, I'll surpass 300 species there. So it gives you an idea of the incredible habitat and bird diversity that you can find there, which is the reason why it's become my main place to bird. Couple things about this map, and let me make sure, can everyone see the map? Someone say yes.
Yep,
Good,
we see
okay,
it.
I got a thumbs
Yeah.
up. The funny thing about birding Montrose is that when you're standing on the beach, there's sort of an optical illusion. As you look straight out from the beach, and if you're looking out this way, you might think you're looking east towards Michigan, but in fact, you are looking almost due north. And if you look at the map, the little insert I put down here, that's because of the way the beach juts out from the Illinois shoreline. And so it creates some interesting dynamics when people are trying to give directions about what they're seeing or where to go. There's often, north becomes east and east becomes or south becomes west. So it's kind of interesting. So just bear in mind, because of this fish hook pier and the way that the beach juts out, that you're looking north. A quick summary of what I'll talk about today. I will start with what to wear. Secondly, how to get to Montrose, the different modes of transportation you might try. Third, where's the best place to park? Fourth, how to enter the park. And lastly, the basic layout of the trails. And I'll also show you kind of my go-to most likely route if I'm birding there. Okay, so what to wear? As you can see from the map, the main area of birding is here. This whole thing is sort of Montrose, but you are surrounded by water on three sides. And so on any given day, it will be colder there due to wind chill off the water from some direction or another. Unless you have pure west winds, it's going to feel colder there. So I highly recommend bringing an extra layer. It's not uncommon to wear gloves and a hat and even a winter coat into May and late May. There have been some spring birding counts where it's felt like 20, 30 degrees. In terms of footwear, most of the new trails and most of the trails are either wood chips or better than that. But if you're going to walk the beach and hike in the dunes, I do recommend boots. The trails are really good, but if you go off trail a little bit down in the dune area here and on the beach, it can get a little bit sandy and wet. Although obviously we highly recommend when you're anywhere where there are trails, please stay on the trails. And I think with the ropes and everything that's happened there, that's working really well. How to get there? So most people I know, this is the main entrance right here. If you're biking, there is a bike rack right at the main entrance. If you are taking public transportation, this is Lakeshore Drive down here. And the bus, there's right by number 1, you can see on my map here, bus stop, Montrose Avenue, that's item number 1. If, like, I would assume 99% of the people that bird there, maybe 95, are taking a car, riding your car, you come down Lakeshore Drive, you will typically turn east on Montrose Avenue. And now I want to talk a little bit about parking because that changed in the last year or two. Montrose Harbor Drive, which is where the main entrance is now metered parking. So you park anywhere in here, you will be paying a meter. The good news, if you don't want to pay a meter, is Montrose Avenue and after the bait shop is right here, turns into Simon Drive. All of this is free parking. So my go-to spot is right here, kitty corner, or right across the street from the bait shop, not kitty corner. And this is where there's a little hot dog stand here that's closed up in the winter. And so I park right near that bait shop. If you take public parking and you take the bus, the walk along Montrose Avenue to the entrance is probably 10 minutes if you walk there without stopping to look at all the great waterfowl in the harbor. From the hot dog stand where I've been parking to get to either the main entrance or onto the beach, it's a couple, 3 minutes. I mean, it's not very far at all. So I also want to cover handicap parking. That would be coming down Montrose Avenue, then you turn here. Instead of going to the main entrance, this is the walkway to the main beach house. You can actually, if there's a handicap accessible parking right here, they do allow you for that reason to park, to go down the walkway. And there's a little handicap parking spot here. There's also handicap parking right at the main entrance near the bike rack that I talked about a little bit earlier. So those are two good areas for that. And now with the new trails up above, it's much more handicapped accessible, which is great. The last item I'll touch on are the restrooms. They're not open year round. There are restrooms at the beach house, and there are restrooms on your way to the Fishhook Pier, or I'm sorry, on the way to the cul-de-sac. This is the pier. So if you were coming this way with your car, you can do this cul-de-sac. There are restrooms here and also restrooms at the beach house. I don't know if there are porta potties year round. Someone might want to comment on that. Does anyone know if there are porta potties there year round?
Hey, Fran, it's Chris Hansen.
Yeah.
Elaine Feldman and I go out there a lot, and we've never seen a porta potty out there
Okay.
in winter, like in off season.
Okay, good to know. I wanted to check. Thank you. So where to enter the park? Again, I'm assuming you're driving or not, but this is the main entrance. It has sort of a new wooden, I don't know, Flintstone-like, you see this type of wooden entry into national parks and stuff. It's really pretty cool. So pretty hard to miss that entry point. And there's a second wooden entrance down here. Those are the main entry points, although there are numerous entry spots from all of these pads, including off the dunes, a couple stair areas coming in. But again, the main entry points are here near that handicap parking I talked about earlier. And this is the main entrance right at the front, which leads you, by the way, right to the Magic Hedge. So those are the entry points. The last thing I want to cover is just kind of the route, your birding route that you might take. How do you want to bird Montrose? For me, it depends on two things. What birds do I want to see? So if it's shorebird season, I definitely want to hit the beach area. This is the public beach. The dog park is down here, public beach here, protected area here. All of these things are on the map here. So depending on how much time I have and whether I want to go to the beach or not, if I'm only birding for an hour, not looking for shorebirds, I would probably mostly spend time in the point. And if my typical day at Montrose will probably be 2 to 3 hours. And so I'll show you kind of what I'm doing. I'm coming down from Evanston. I live in Evanston. I turn on Montrose and I park at my hot dog spot right there that I talked about earlier, because I don't want to pay for parking, mostly because I don't know how long I'm going to be there. If it's good birding, 2 hours might turn into 3, might turn into 4 in May, but typically it's about 2 hours. So from here, my first stop where I park is usually to hit the beach. And again, if there are shorebirds, I will track this route. If it's early morning, I want the sun behind me. The sun would be in the east, which is from here. So I may go first, try to get along the pier and then bird the beach this way and look at the shorebirds from an eastern direction. So the sun is at my back. After I bird the beach, I'll usually go into the dune area here. This is where you might need boots. It can be underwater after rain. There are these 2 pennies. I'm sure Jeff might talk about that a little bit, but all of this could be, there could be water in any of these spots. So I'll bird the beach. I'll walk this area here. And then I hop up into the butterfly meadow. And now I'm going to backtrack because I forgot to talk about before I park. I apologize. I will usually drive here and stop at a few spots, look in the harbor, come around the harbor drive and just check the harbor in different spots for waterfowl. I apologize for forgetting to mention that. So I'll come like this in my car, do the cul-de-sac, go back around, and then I park at the hot dog stand. Then I walk to the beach, I bird the beach, hop up into the dune area, come up here, and then I typically will bird the butterfly meadow next, which is this is new. I think the butterfly garden is only maybe 5 to 7 years old. It's a great spot for finches, really great spot for sparrows, obviously a great spot for butterflies. It's beautiful in the spring and summer. After I bird the butterfly garden, I usually pop out behind the magic hedge, and then I spend time up here, magic hedge, upper meadow. I'll pop out here to the lake, see if there are if there's anything interesting in the lake. The cormorants are usually there. And that's pretty much it. So doing all of that, and there's a nice wooded area up here. There's some good fields in here. We've had flycatchers. This is the forbidden zone, wooded area. Same thing here, wooded area, good for warblers. And obviously, I usually do 2 trips along the magic hedge, behind it and in front of it, depending on the sun, but just a phenomenal place to bird and to spend some time. So that is it for me.
Hey, Fran, how did the
Yes.
Forbidden Zone get its name?
That's a great question. I think it might have been the first place, the first section that was ever fenced off, which is interesting. I know I might be hitting 10 minutes here, but originally when they started fencing off areas of Montrose, the birders went nuts because like, oh, I can't walk through there. And now as we realize how much traffic there is, we appreciate the fact that these places are fenced off. It's leading to better bird diversity. It's protecting the ground, all the ground habitat that was starting to get trampled. So Good question, but I'm pretty sure the forbidden zone was the first place you couldn't walk through, and that's how it may have got its name. So I am now going to turn it over to Matthew Savitas.
Thanks, Fran. Great job. Okay. Hey, everyone. I'm Matthew Savitas. I'm also an Evanstonian. I live about 20 minutes from Montrose. And so, it's in what I'll call my local patch. And like Fran, I visit there as much as I can, especially during migration, because it's one of the best places to see the diversity, the avian diversity that travels through the Chicago area. What I want to talk about a little bit is the Magic Hedge and the areas surrounding it. When's a good time to visit, and what you might be able to see when you're there. So I'm going to just take a slice of Fran's map that he put together, and I really appreciate him doing that. And kind of zoom in on Montrose Bird Sanctuary proper, as I'll call it. So the entrance right there on the Inner Harbor Drive at number 14. Well, once you enter through that gate, you're in Montrose Bird Sanctuary. And I think when people talk about the Magic Hedge, yes, it's technically the area marked 16 on that map. It's a small section of the bird sanctuary. Technically, that's the Magic Hedge. However, when people say the hedge, I think they typically refer to, this area that I've zoomed in on, the bird sanctuary proper, which includes the hedge, the upper meadow, what we call the clump, the forbidden zone, all these little nicknames to the area up top, the wooded area with the paths that run through it, which has been expanded over time to include, the peripheral planting or native planting area on the outside, and also the butterfly garden that Fran talked about on the other side. So you can see, for the most part, you can see, species in any of these areas. So that's what I'll focus on. This slide kind of puts together, a list of year-round residents, I'd say. You can find at Montrose at any time of the year. It might be pretty similar to what you would see in your yard if you live in the Chicago area. The species that I've got starred here, yeah, they're not going to be walking around in the sanctuary proper. Well, not, maybe mallards will be occasionally, but you'll commonly see them flying around or perched nearby. But in the upper areas, the hedge, the meadow, we're primarily talking about songbirds, right? Passerines. Those are the types of species that you're going to find there. But over the course of the year, there's quite a variety of migrant bird species that come through. You'll find that Montrose is one of the best places for diversity to see something as beautiful as this yellow-billed cuckoo that I have here, as well as its cousin, the black-billed cuckoo. Everything from hummingbirds to certain species of owls, almost all of the woodpeckers, flycatchers, vireos, on and on and on, sparrows, warblers, just some of the stars of the show that you can see in the bird sanctuary, right? So when should you go? Well, I would say any time of the year is good, but clearly December, January, February, much like Illinois in general, you're going to see, smaller numbers or diversity. Now, these numbers I've taken from eBird, and this represents species reported to eBird by month for the entire site, which includes the beach, the harbor, etc. But I think that what you'll find is, the number of species for songbirds mirrors this bar chart somewhat similarly. So here we are in March, and you see that the number of species starts to ramp up. As we get to April, May, you're talking 250, 275 species have been recorded at Montrose during those times. As you go into June and July, it's primarily breeding season. And then again, back up at late summer, early fall, just a wealth of species that are available to be seen, and even into November. November is really an underrated month to go birding, and so I would highly recommend you visit Montrose just about any time. If you want the biggest bang for your buck, of course, you're talking about April and May, and then again in the fall. Keep in mind, Montrose is a multi-use facility. Of course, the bird sanctuary is donated, it is singularly focused, but people use Montrose and the surrounding areas for everything, including the city. And any number of events can be going on. And when the weather is warm, races, you name it, picnicking, going to the beach, it can be really crowded. And as I mentioned in the chat, keep that in mind. It's a little bit easier to get in and out of there earlier in the day. Later in the day is fine to visit, but you may struggle to find a little bit more parking and space at that time. There's all, as I mentioned, there's all types of species that you can see. And I'll just focus in on a couple of families. And I use these frequency graphs that I find on eBird as well to give you an idea of what you might see at certain times of the year. And first, let's talk about sparrow families. And I pulled up 5 common types of sparrows that you can see at Montrose, including song sparrow, white-throated, white-crowned, chipping, and Lincoln sparrows. And you'll notice that here on the left-hand side, I first highlighted the week starting on April 1st. So if you were to visit Montrose looking for sparrows, the first week in April, what it shows you is that nearly 9 out of 10 people visiting Montrose during that first week of April will report a song sparrow, right? Less than 2 out of every 10 are reporting white-throated sparrow. So this is a fantastic time to see song sparrow, not a bad time to see white-throated sparrow. But the other types of sparrows that I've listed here are going to come later in the year. So if you use eBird as a source, you can really get a good sense as to when things are coming and going. Then on the right-hand side of that graphic, which is a little bit out of, here, let me minimize that. On the right-hand side of that graphic in the fall, right? If you were visiting the first week of October, 9 out of 10 people are seeing white-throated sparrows. 6 out of 10 are seeing white-crowned sparrows. Song sparrow is still persistent. Lincoln sparrows are really popular. So, you get a feel for when things are coming and going as far as migrant species are concerned. But, we'll just go back to this real quick. If you come during April, May, again, August, September, October, you're going to see, you'll see lots of different species. What about warblers? Again, I've listed 5 different types of warblers that you might see at any time of the year: black and white, black-throated blue, Blackburnian, someone mentioned earlier, bay-breasted, and Connecticut. So if you were to come the first week of May, you'd have 50% shot at seeing black and white warbler, and so on. It's a little early for a Connecticut warbler. I'll tell you more about that because Connecticut warbler is perhaps Montrose is probably one of the best places in the entire state to see Connecticut warbler. If you were to come in the week of September 15th, bay-breasted warbler would probably be reported. Again, black and white, black-throated blue. This is just some of the species that you might expect to see in the spring and the fall. I did focus in specifically on Connecticut warbler because even those national birders who are during big years sometimes will visit Montrose specifically for this species. This species tends to arrive a little bit later in May, peaks about the 3rd week, and you can usually find it in and around the hedge, on the ground, walking near dense leafy ground cover. So sometimes really difficult to see. You have to be patient, but every once in a while it'll peek its little head out, and you might be lucky enough to get a picture such as I've taken one here. So that's kind of an overview of what you might see. I think if you visit Montrose during the times that I mentioned. And so why don't I now turn it over to Jeff Williamson.
Thanks, Matthew. Oh gosh, now I got to talk, huh? But well, you know, as people have said, you know, Montrose is just a fabulous place to bird. I want to start a little bit by, you know, I saw a lot of the questions in the chat about you know, what time of the day to go to the bird Montrose. Just make a couple of remarks about that. As was mentioned by a couple of folks, generally speaking, anywhere on the planet, the best time to bird there is in the couple hours after dawn. I mean, because the birds are the most active, the birds are the most vocal. It's easiest to see the birds. There's the most dynamism that's going on, and that's true of Montrose Point just as it is everywhere else. But it's not the only time to bird any particular location. There's bird life present at other points of the day, and I'm reminded of the fact that when Steve Spitzer was with us, he unfortunately passed away a few years ago. He began birding, doing kind of like an exercise constitutional along the lakefront, and that he was doing that not at dawn. He was doing that mostly midday, and he's one of, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 people that saw a wandering tattler, the only wandering tattler ever observed in the state of Illinois at Montrose Point. Yanye Peng photographed, got a full frame killer photo of a Ross's gull on the Fishhook Pier. That photograph was taken not at the beginning of the day. So stuff happens during all portions of the day. And even the time of year, I'm trying to share my screen here. Even the time of year, there are, you know, certainly May is the period in which there's the greatest species diversity. But I remember at one point when the late Wes Seraphin, I ran into him out at Montrose Point, and he was all pumped. He lived down in Orland Park. He came in to bird Montrose, was all excited to be here because of what a great week Montrose had been having. He's all excited to get out there and see all these birds. And, you know, I live on this map, I live kind of over, just over here. I've never lived more than 2 miles from Montrose Point during my 32 years in Chicago, and I'm just kind of across the street. And at that particular time when I saw Wes, I had been out there basically every day of this week, and he's kind of extolling all the great things that we're seeing, you know, this, and I'm thinking, you know, gosh, what a ho-hum week it was. And so every day that I was out was maybe not a day necessarily to write home about, but the collection of the days over the course of the week turned out to be really quite good. So I think the Chicago lakefront in general is definitely at its peak during the migratory periods. There's also something to see during the summertime and the wintertime as well. But certainly the time when you see the most people coming out to Montrose, it's during the migration seasons. I think we touched on this a little bit. This is you know, an image of the point, and I've got marked in red where I consider to be the rest facilities at the point. The beach house is up here. Can you guys see my white arrow? Does that show up?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, great, wonderful. So up here is the beach house, and in season, those restrooms are open. Be aware that over here there's a little building that has restrooms that is also open in season. Somebody mentioned in chat that there is almost always a porta potty over here, and actually, let me rephrase. There is always a porta potty in this vicinity. And for whatever magical reason, it tends to be a fairly clean porta potty almost all the time. A lot of times there are a collection of porta potties down here at the end of the road that comes around and circles that at the turnaround circle at the end of the parking lot there. For the fishermen, that's another resource. Those tend not to necessarily be clean all the time, but sometimes are. And there's always, if you pop up, come out, exit the point, go up Lakeshore Drive to Foster Avenue, a short ways in is a McDonald's at Foster and Sheridan that also offers rest facilities for the Montrose birder. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about food and coffee, but in this area, the uptown area of Chicago, you've got a lot of options to get a good bite to eat or to refresh after you're birding with a cup of coffee. A close one, if you head out Montrose Avenue to the First Light, which is at Clarendon, hang a left and go down a quarter of a mile, you can get the Dollop coffee. All sorts of good resources to have available in the neighboring Chicago area. With respect to birding, I want to point out the presence of, one of the nice things about Montrose Point is that you have in a very small area a large variety of different, I'll call them micro habitats. And that contributes tremendously to the diversity of bird life that you can see at Montrose Point. One of the big features on the Chicago lakefront is Lake Michigan itself. And so here is a rather scribbled diagram where of my version of where the best places are to look at things out on the lake. And right here at the harbor mouth tends to be a place where a lot of water birds will congregate. You can view that from the west side. Coming in, and there's a path along the lake that goes all the way down to the Jarvis Bird Sanctuary, and then further on, here's Golf Course Pond. You can check those areas, and coming in and take a quick scan of the lake, or you can come around to the end of the turnaround and check that area from here as well. Between this point and that point, there's certainly also other options for looking at the lake, but most anything that you can see from in here, you can also see from over there and from down here. And the advantage of being out at this point is that you're out kind of, about the furthest to the east that you can get. In this section over here is a place where you can get a little bit of shelter from the wind if the wind is coming from the north or the west by where the salt cedars are. If the wind is coming from the north and the west, just even the mere bend of the path around here gives you a little bit of shelter from the wind here. But the very best place to be for watching what's going on out at the lake is out at the end of the Fishhook Pier. And out at the end of the Fishhook Pier, you've got this small little light tower that you can utilize as a wind block and get good views in a variety of different directions. I marked this little spot here because you get a close view up the beach and also the same view out over the lake. And so at least on calm days in cooler weather, you can stand there for a long time. But the Fishhook Pier along its length and all along here are good places for watching what's going on out at the lake. Fran covered for us a lot of what happens down here in the sanctuary proper. I want to point out a couple of other places here that are good spots to look for a variety of birds in season. And these are mostly, I'm thinking mostly in terms of the land birds, the passerines. So again, this is focused mostly on the migratory periods. But here's the sanctuary, Montrose Point Bird Sanctuary. Here's the butterfly garden. And then just a little bit off from the butterfly garden is the pathway that runs from Montrose Harbor Drive down to the beach house. And the trees along there are good places to look for a variety of warblers, sparrows, thrushes, orioles, a lot of different things are in this section. Along the edge of the butterfly garden was a little bit livelier, I think maybe about 10 years ago. But it's a similar kind of thing that's going on in there. Don't forget to bird south of Montrose Harbor Drive. When you first arrive, there's some hawthorns down in here. There's some good trees that attract a lot of birds. And then the area out here, a little bit to the south of the entrance and around Montrose Harbor Drive, this section here, you'll see a lot of evergreens that are planted there. It's a good spot for sparrows. It's a good spot for pine warbler. I would hazard that most of my pine warblers that I've seen in Montrose have been in that region. And that's something that's also a good place to visit in addition to the sanctuary proper. Back here are a set of trees that are on the backside of this big parking lot where they store the boats over winter. And not something necessarily to make a special trip over to see, but that's also a good place where you get a wide variety of birds showing up, and it tends to get a little less in the way of foot traffic, and so there's a good amount of birds that are in there. And then the plantings down in here south of Montrose Avenue, in the vicinity of Golf Course Pond, are very good for sparrows and finches. This little green X up here, there's a concession stand that's right over there, and the area that's near to the concession stand is a very good place to go visit if you're down on that end of that end of the beach. Fran kind of described his route. I'm gonna show a couple of ways that I've birded the point. Here's one where, like I said, I live over here, so sometimes I come in by car, park here, and or either drive around the point and bird things. Sometimes I walk from my place in there. Sometimes I ride my bicycle in there. But regardless of the mode of transportation or how far you've come to get to Montrose Point, very often you're coming in this way. If you are on foot or on bicycle, it's often nice to kind of come down here and check the harbor mouth. And a typical path for me when I bird Montrose, my tendency is to visit every place once, just kind of make a circuit through the point and visit all the different spots. And my approach is to bird the sanctuary at the very last. So a lot of times I'll come in, I'll walk down, I'll see what's at the harbor mouth. I'll come around and kind of walk around the harbor this way, walk all along the edge of the lake, go all the way out to the end of the fishhook pier, then come in, come back down, then cover the beach next. The Montrose Beach Dunes, Leslie Bourne's. I remember, Montrose Beach used to be just sand beach the whole way across. And then some time ago, the earth movers were late kind of clearing out the dunes that they create to help prevent the erosion of the sand on the beach. And the little cottonwood sapling had sprouted up on the beach, and longtime Montrose birder Kanai Hirabayashi stood in front of the earth mover that was going to plow over this little cottonwood sapling, and Tiananmen Square style, and prevented the death of the sapling. And that sapling was kind of the formation of the Montrose Beach Dunes. The earth mover went away, a couple more saplings sprouted, and the dunal formation began. And kudos to Leslie Bourne's and her crew for creating the Montrose Beach Dunes into one of the most incredible natural sites in the entire state. Anyway, after getting off the pier, I come down on the beach. I bird this area during season when you can get a lot of gulls or shorebirds coming in. I will often walk the length of the beach. And my strategy in part for walking all of this area is really, it's a way of getting myself to spend time in these zones, because the bird life at Montrose Point is really pretty dynamic. At the beginning of the day, which is the time that I tend to get out there, you've got all these migrating birds flying around over the lake and passing by. And some of them will fly over, some of them will come down and land on the beach briefly. Some of them will land in the lake briefly, and then they'll move on. And being out and looking at those areas when those events happen, gives you an opportunity to see those birds. And so spending a little time in each of these areas is helpful. And then once I'm done birding the beach, I'll pop up and I'll bird the sanctuary proper. And then on my way out, I might hit some of these other areas. I think that's my 10 minutes. Let me turn things over to maybe we can do a little bit of a question and answer at this point. Edward?
Yeah, all right. So first and foremost, can I get a quick round of virtual applause here for our speakers? Let's go ahead and get some questions out here. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. But one that I saw come up a couple of times was some uncertainty about the dunes and like whether you can or can't go into them, their protected area. Can you guys shed some light on that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. As was mentioned along the way, that there are various areas that get roped off or marked off. The dunes area especially when Monty and Rose, the piping plover pair that was nesting there, there was one summer where they were nesting in the dunes. Other times when they're nesting away from the dunes, they're foraging in the dunes. And so sometimes that area gets closed off for the protection of the plovers. A lot of the areas get closed off for the protection of the plant life and the habitat. And I would guess I would just generally say, don't cross the ropes, don't cross the fence lines. Most of what you can see or almost all of what you can see at Montrose Point birdwise does not necessitate you to walk through those areas. A lot of the areas with, say in the Montrose Beach dunes, people looking, for instance, for these finicky species like Nelson sparrows and LeConte sparrows, kind of tromping through the habitat in Montrose Point when the fences are up, gets replaced by waiting patiently on the periphery for the birds to pop up, which does happen. So it's a very dynamic place with regard to what is closed off to foot traffic. For instance, some of these things kind of changed when the accessible path, the paved path, was put through the point. I mean, I remember that I noticed that there was a lot of concern expressed as to whether or not, we were losing too many trees with the creation of this wide path through the area. And in my estimation, what happened was we gained space for trees by the construction of the path because of the channeling of the foot traffic through the area. And what ended up some of these other areas got closed off to entry by people. I don't really know of any particular spot in the whole Montrose Point area that you can't bird because of the restriction with regard to access. Although, maybe with the dunes, you can't get as close as you might like in some cases to birds. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
No.
So another question that popped up in the chat from several people, and I think it was answered in the chat, but I'll ask it for the sake of kind of everybody else here. Is there a best time of day to be out there birding?
I'll take that one if that's all right. All right, so yeah, I think it was answered, but let's reiterate. Any time of day is fine, but there are going to be some factors that limit access. Let's say later in the day. Jeff mentioned it earlier. Usually the hours just after sunrise are the best for birding for a variety of reasons, and the birds are typically the most active at that time. And when birds are most active, you have the best opportunity to see and hear the largest number of species. Having said that, you can go to Montrose any time of day and have a great experience. However, keep in mind, you're birding in this city with, a city of millions of people. Montrose happens to be an area that the city has targeted as also an event, a hosting place. I don't know, any number of weekends during the year, you will find races hosted there. Not to mention there's a huge public beach, or people just like to hang out. There's soccer fields, et cetera, et cetera. There's a working harbor with hundreds of boats. You get the idea. Parking can be an issue, right? So I would recommend typically trying to go earlier in the morning if you can. If you can't, not a big deal. Just keep in mind you may be inconvenienced and have to park a little bit further away.
Park way down on Montrose and take the bus in.
Yeah, and on this point too, that the time of day to visit Montrose, so Matthew raises some good points in terms of the access. I remember one time I was teaching a flycatcher identification class, and so we had a field trip out into Montrose, which I unfortunately scheduled for like 10 a.m. on June 4th, something like that, and we had to cancel it because there was just no way that we were going to be able to reconvene the group on the site. But there's a cycle of bird life through the course of the day. You'll see more migrating hawks in the middle of the day at Montrose, just like you'll see more migrating hawks in the middle of the day anywhere else. I mean, that's something that we don't tend to see in the first hours of the morning. But one thing in particular is that although we've got a much better, much higher quality habitat in the Montrose Point area today than we did when I first moved to Chicago. I mean, it was just basically the hedge and a bunch of Kentucky bluegrass and not much else. But despite the fact that we've got this nice habitat in there, it's not a large space. And so many of the birds that are migrating, the passerine birds predominantly migrate in the night hours. And when the sun comes up, they come to Earth for food and shelter. And the configuration of Montrose Point sticking way out into the lake makes it very attractive as a first stopping point. And the birds come in, they're tired and hungry after having flown all night, and they find some food and they find some rest. And then they say, okay, where else can I go for kind of like a more permanent feeding and resting spot? And so a lot of times the birds will spend a relatively brief amount of time at Montrose before they move into, in my imagination at least, to the various river corridors in the Chicago area, go over to the Chicago River, the DuPage River, or what have you. So that's another factor that tends to give greater species diversity early in the morning. I know my birding lists at Montrose have they're bigger if I get out there in the early part of the day than they are later in the day. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth it to go to the site and visit it later in the day. I mean, there's a lot of factors that will influence when it is that you can get out there. And many of the birds, despite some of them leaving, many of them will stay there and they'll hang out all day. So the best birding is in the middle of May, in their first couple hours of the day. But if all you do is just bird in the beginning of the day in the middle of May, then you'll miss out on lots and lots and lots of stuff.
This is especially nice to hear as somebody who does like the vast majority of his birding during his lunch break, from that noon to 1 window there. Yeah, definitely take the advantage to just go out when you can. I think somebody said in the chat there, the best time to go birding is a time that you're not in the office. So definitely second that. I got a question here. Chris was asking, how is it when it's like raining or drizzling out there? And maybe that can also just kind of segue into kind of observations on weather and kind of how that affects birding out there.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Okay, so again, it will depend a bit. You know, let's just say if it's drizzling is one thing, misting, that kind of thing. If it's raining, chances are you're going to want to wait till it stops. And that's just because we have a difficult time seeing in the rain, right? And your optics get wet, and you get wet, and it's uncomfortable and miserable. But there will be certain situations where a little bit of rain is not a deterrent, and it can be really productive and actually quite fun. So I would say, it kind of depends.
Yeah, it's a hard question. I remember one time, it was early in May, where we had one of these Chicago weather events where a cold front moved in. It was snowing, and all these little insect eating birds that had just flown, hundreds of miles to get this far north, were now faced with freezing temperatures. And what do they do? And they all ended up on the ground trying to make a living hopping around in the grass, which was quite distressing with respect to concern for the well-being of the birds, but in terms of your capacity to see them, it was you got some real killer views. Weather's a funny thing, and some of these severe weather events end up making for good birding, like I was describing, where you get these kind of fallout conditions. A light misting rain, I think, is one of the most enjoyable times to go out to see the birds, because the little bit of rain that you're getting will bring the insect life to a lower level, and the insect life will draw the birds down to it, and so that can be pretty enjoyable. And then there are also, if you're looking for, let's say it's March or October, and you're looking for the water birds passing by the point, it's oftentimes these really difficult weather conditions that are the best conditions to be out looking for the birds. So I let me conclude this with what may not be a particularly helpful remark with regard to your question, and it kind of goes to what Edward was saying. It was like, anytime that you're out birding, it's better than being in the office. A lot of it is, I think a good way to think about these kinds of things is that, when you have time to go birding, how do you adjust yourself to the current weather conditions? If it's springtime and there's a good blow from the south, get out into these migratory areas. If it's the fall and there's a good blow from the north, get out and you can get out to these along the lakefront maybe, and watch the waterfowl migration. If the weather is particularly crazy, find a sheltered area to watch the birds from. And I know, kind of like watching for you can always accommodate yourself to some of these kinds of conditions, and I think it's more or less the rainier it is, the less comfortable it is, and so that may make you decide that this is not the time to go birding. But you can find things. The birds are out there. They're just a little bit less visible.
Diana put a excellent pair of questions in the chat box there. I don't know if you guys can see that. But does anybody want to take a stab at A? Are the trails particularly treacherous during the winter? Is this a normal thing? And then also tackling the question of, looks like maybe feeding birds in the hedge.
Yeah, I'll do that. Is that all right, Matthew?
Go for it.
So all the all of the forest preserve trails all of the forest preserve trails can be pretty treacherous in the winter, especially unpaved trails. They don't usually bring equipment in there to clear them out. So what ends up happening, people walk on them, they pack down the snow, and they can be really icy. There's no way around that except sometimes I try to walk on the, right off the ice and just stay in the snow, which is less slippery, but again, no great solution. You just have to, there are days where it becomes really pretty tough and you just need to be careful. As far as feeding the birds, I am personally against that. I wish it didn't happen. I have, if people put feeders in the woods, I have removed those myself. The chickadees and cardinals have become used to it. There's an argument that it's good for families, it's good for people to get involved in birding. You go out, you put your hand out and a chickadee eats out of your hand. It's not my idea of birding. And I only think certain species will do that. So I don't think you're going to have, woodpeckers and flycatchers eating out of your hand, but the chickadees and the cardinals will do that. And yeah, they start to follow you around. So I'm hoping at some point, maybe the park district puts signs up and tells people not to put food out, because not only are they feeding birds, I've seen like food scraps left out there, and that's going to attract rodents and things like that. Just not a great idea.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering that question, because like I said in the chat box, that was my first time there, and I wanted to go for my birthday, which is the middle of February. So I'm sure that was a great idea anyways, but it was, I had to like hold onto the ropes a little bit because I was afraid I was going to fall. It was so icy. And then I had all these like the chickadees, like you said, the cardinals and the chickadees were not afraid at all. And they just kept like landing all over me. And I didn't bring any bird food with me. So I'm like, I don't know if this is like a good thing or bad thing, but then I felt bad that I didn't have anything to give them. So thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate it.
I remember that there was a woman that was going out there and feeding an overwintering red-breasted nuthatch, and she would spend a lot of money on pine nuts to feed the red-breasted nuthatch. The red-breasted nuthatch would fly in, pick up a pine nut, go store it, fly back to the hand, pick up a pine nut, go store it, fly back to the hand, pick up a pine nut and go store it. And yeah, I mean, feeding birds is feeding birds, I guess, as Fran has mentioned. Yeah.
Is that when you've made it? Your home bird feeder is full of pine nuts specifically. It's like, this is the gourmet style bird feeding.
Yeah, gourmet feeding of birds. Yeah, feeding birds is that's a fraught topic, I think. With respect to the trails and the condition of the trails, yeah, I mean, the wintertime presents a lot of challenges on there. I was talking about going out on the Fishhook Pier. There are times that the Fishhook Pier gets icy. Don't go out on the Fishhook Pier when it's icy. People do. There are times when the lake is really vicious and there are waves crashing over the Fishhook Pier. And I've seen people ride their bicycles through the crashing waves going out in the end of the Fishhook Pier. I would not recommend doing that either. I think in the winter time for your birthday, Diana, if you focus on the harbor, what's going on in the harbor, and maybe going down and seeing what's happening on the beach. There's not really a whole diverse set of diversity over in the Montrose Point Bird Sanctuary proper at that time of year.
Yeah, I wish I had your map when I went. That would have been very useful because I didn't know what I was doing anyway. So.
Birthday
but
birding.
I'm sorry, can I say one more thing? And then I will not bother you guys again. I did see a comment in the chat just now that said that the park district will not salt in natural areas. And that makes more sense to me now too. So thank you for Kathleen for that comment. I appreciate that.
All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. We will be following up with everybody here with an email involving the recording, the map, as well as some ways to contact us with any further questions afterwards that we didn't get to here. But once again, can I get a really big thank you and round of applause here for our speakers, Alicia, Fran, Matthew, Jeff. Really, really appreciate you guys' time this evening, sharing all of your knowledge with everybody here. Really awesome, informative program here. And once again, this is Patch Chat. This is a joint program series between Chicago Ornithological Society and Chicago Audubon Society. If you're not familiar with our organizations, I want to drop those websites in the chat here. So definitely head over to those websites, take a look. A lot of great programs coming up, a lot of great walks. If you're not a member, why the heck not? And there was a question earlier about, walks and trips to Montrose. I mean, all of the local birding groups lead trips to Montrose because it's the place to be. So everything from Chicago Audubon, Chicago Ornithological, Feminist Bird Club, Illinois Ornithological, you name it. They're all at some point. Check them all out. Check out their various event pages. Somebody somewhere is going to be doing a trip to Montrose that you can plug into. So with that said, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Have a good one. Enjoy your weekend. Get out there and get some birding in. See your sandhill cranes. And we will see you on the next program. Have a good one, everybody.